morning. Just recently I celebrated a wedding and afterwards I was talking with some of the guests as they were sort of waiting for some photos and rain to stop and so on. And they asked me in the conversation, so what do we call you? Are you priest or father, or what do we call you? And I said, well, I'm not a priest, and no, you don't call me father. The technical name would be reverend, but look, call me Jeff. That's who I am. And I was thinking about it later, and in saying that, what I guess I'm saying is my identity, me, is not about a title or a role. It's not about status or those symbolic things that we put upon ourselves or the ways we define ourselves. Ultimately, it's not about how much money I've accumulated or not accumulated, or how much success or failure I've had. It's not about how much education I've got or the experiences I've had or what I've done or not done. My identity is not in those things. It's something deeper and more fundamental. This unique being that is me, or the unique being that is you. We begin a journey of Lent this week, and the journey of Lent is an invitation to take us deeper into this understanding, this awareness of who we are. It's a journey of life and death and struggle, following the story of Jesus as he walks to the cross and challenges us, inspires us, calls something from us, or invites something from us to become more deeply and truly who we are. I remember some years ago, someone lent me one of the BBC Songs of Praise episodes. It was a series that highlighted hymns and songs, contemporary and otherwise, from the church. But it always had a theme and a story and an interview as part of it. And I don't remember the songs or that on this particular show. And it was the story of a lifeboat captain that he really wanted me to see. I don't remember a whole lot of what he said, except, the lifeboats are the boats that go out into the North Sea and the English Channel and so forth when there's a ferry disaster or a boating accident or someone goes overboard to rescue. And this lifeboat captain was talking and said, in the North Sea, particularly in the worst conditions, the frigid waters, you have about 20 minutes before hypothermia sets in and you die. And he said, in all his years as a lifeboat captain, going out in the North Sea, plucking people out of the water, he's never met an atheist, because when a person falls into the water, they recognise there is nothing they can do. In that moment, they're powerless. It doesn't matter how much money they've got in the bank at home, or how big their house is, what career or status, fame, fortune, power, any of that sort of stuff. It doesn't matter who they are, what they've done. At that moment, they are powerless. It's their naked, raw, vulnerable humanity. And they reach out to something, someone beyond themselves, and they pray. It's all that they can do. It's a moment of sheer helplessness. And I was thinking of that this week, the situation in Ukraine, the invasion of Russia, and what it's like for those people whose lives I'll never fully understand. People whose city is being bombed, where there's armies coming in, where there's fear and violence, noise, explosions, uncertainty, where people are escaping, taking whatever they can carry and nothing more, escaping over borders into other lands, leaving homes and security and safety. Or the people in Queensland, southern Queensland or northern New South Wales, in the midst of floodwaters. People who have experienced this torrential rain and these sudden surges of water which have caught them, and they're lost. They don't know what. Well, there's nothing they can do. Some of them are hiding in the cavities of their roofs. trying to escape the rising waters, hoping that somehow they can get out. What is it like in that moment where it doesn't matter, the realization that it doesn't matter who we are, what we have, or anything, we are vulnerable and helpless, powerless before the forces of nature, powerless before the situations of the world and oppressive forces of other regimes, powerless before life and death. This week, we read the story, the first week in Lent, where Jesus has just been baptized. And as he comes out of the water, he experiences this grace-filled, holy moment where the heavens open and the Spirit descends and he hears the voice of heaven saying, "You are my Son, my beloved." It's a sacred, holy moment of affirmation of who he is. You are this child of God. That's your identity and your being. Out of this moment, he's then thrust into the wilderness by the Spirit, driven in there. And the wilderness is that lonely place where there is fear and uncertainty, where there is confusion, where the usual distractions are, the iPhones and iPads and Android phones, smartphones and tablets and computers and TVs and sound things and books and all the things that we might use to distract ourselves are missing. We are there alone in our naked humanity. It may be the time of grief where someone we have loved is either nearing death or has died. And we feel absolutely powerless and helpless before this. There's something in our being that is broken and shattered, and we don't know what to do. We can't do anything. We are vulnerable and helpless before life and death. It may be in other situations in our life, illness, chronic physical or mental illness, where we just feel helpless or powerless, or situations of conflict and uncertainty, or the experience of violence or abuse, where our humility and vulnerability are exposed, a raw humanity. That raw humanity is something in our society, in our culture, we want to avoid. We want to hide from. We don't want to show the world that we're weak or vulnerable. And yet, in the wilderness, in the temptations that Jesus experiences in this time of wilderness, what's exposed is that raw, vulnerable, humble humanity is the deepest and profoundest sense of our being. That it's in that place we are formed and we find our life, who we are. And we find that in our weakness there is a strength, because we no longer rely on our own devices, our own skills, and we trust in something beyond ourselves, other people, and this God who holds us deeply and profoundly. It's in this place that we discover a deeper sense of who we are. In the silence and in the kind of distractions that try and tempt us and take us away. Jesus is tempted. If you really are a child of God, the Son of God, take this rock and turn it into bread because you're starving, hungry. Do something that's relevant, meaningful. Do something for yourself, Take control. Or he takes him up onto a big mountain and says, look, there's all the worlds out there. You talk about, God's reign and doing good things and stuff. All of these are yours if you bow down and worship me. If you come onto my side, I'll give it to you. Go, be famous and powerful. Or he takes him to the height of the temple and says, if you really are of God, jump down. And God will send angels to save you, and everyone will see, and they'll believe you and trust you. Fame, spectacular, relevance, power. These are the things that we're tempted in our lives to grasp onto. Addictions that take us and help us believe that we in our own strength and might can do it. And it's lies. It's lies. And Jesus says no to all of it. I'm going to trust in this way of God. This way of humility and vulnerability. And in that vulnerability and humility I'll find the power of love. The power of grace and justice and all the things that God stands for in this realm of God. And as we journey with Jesus, we'll see him move closer to the cross, and in that last week, edge closer to death. And that the powers and principalities of the world will rise up and will nail him to a cross. And he will die. Vulnerable, humble, humiliated before the world. But that's not the end of the story. Because love will raise him up in a new way, in a new life. And that's what he promises. But I mean, that's a story for another day. At the moment, we sit with our own vulnerability, our own helplessness, our own powerlessness. We sit with the deep sense of who we are. And like Nelson Mandela, who was a pretty brash and arrogant and power-seeking young bloke who was going to, do this and that, was fired up against apartheid and was imprisoned for 27 years, who discovered in that crucible of suffering and struggle his true deep identity, and in that true deep compassion. And he found a way to be a compassionate, wise, generous, humble man who had all the capacity to lead, and to lead well, and to lead his people into a new way of being. And it's that kind of wisdom and compassion that we need in our world. And the way of Jesus invites us into that. So it's not the way of Vladimir Putin, who is this oligarch, powerful megalomaniac, narcissistic, egocentric kind of person who wants all power to himself and to be tough and the big man. And for a time he's going to succeed and he's going to wreak havoc on our world, and he already has. But he won't last. His way and his will are not true. They'll cause much devastation, much evil and much pain, but it's not the truth. And Jesus invites us into a way of truth, of life, that is for all people, that embraces everyone into this rich, deep community of love, where we discover more truly and fully who we are, our identity as children of God that are uniquely created and deeply and profoundly loved. And we don't have to be any more or any less than that. This is the true gift of who we are. And that true gift is a gift to the world, if we allow ourselves to freely live and love in this way of God. So will you journey with Jesus through Lent and discover the way of life and hope in Him? Amen.
Mm-hmm.